G'day mates, it's the Doctor here, and it's been a year since I made my 10 best and worst Brenner era videos. However, one thing that people have criticized those videos for is that I included episodes from Big World Big Adventures, or some go by the acronym BWBA. But this is where the line between BWBA and the Brenner era gets blurred. See, Brenner left in 2019, so season 23 was already in production ready to air that same year. There is one season in Big World Big Adventures that Brenner had no involvement with, and that would be season 24. This season will not only mark the end to the embarrassingly short-lived BWBA, but the CGI era entirely, as Mattel has decided to cut costs to Thomas & Friends, which is why they're going for a cheaper route with 2D animation so they can still find a way to make a profit. Does it ever occur to these chimps in business suits that you need good stories for people to buy into your television shows? But how was season 24? Was it a strong send-off, or did it end the series with a sad chuff of smoke? Let's go over the best and worst episodes season 24 had to offer us. Starting with one of the better episodes is Sonny's Second Chance. This episode is a continuation of a two-part special World of Tomorrow. While I believe World of Tomorrow left much to be desired, Sonny's Second Chance was a decent follow-up, taking a character who didn't leave much of an impression in the special, wrapping up his character arc, how he was associated with the crooks, and seeing how the engines do not trust him. What does drag this episode down is after Sonny rescues Diesel, the Fat Controller tells Sonny he is about to send him away for knocking over the trucks with fish. That is despite how he should clearly be able to tell right in front of him, Sonny just rescued Diesel. But where this episode makes up for that is this very specific sound long-time fans may be familiar with. That is a sound effect directly out of a classic era. I never thought I would see the day. Maybe it happens more than this scene, but we never noticed the inclusion of classic sound effects before in the CGI episodes. Now we flip the table over for one of the more inept episodes, and that is SHANKAR'S Makeover. One of the biggest problems with Big World Big Adventures is how, despite visiting other railways around the world, there is almost little to no focus on the railways themselves. And here, it is a story about dress up. My, that sounds like something that could happen on Sodor. We don't need to travel to India for this, but that is how the stories in BWBA were portrayed. Uninspired, bland, and a complete lack of study on the foreign railways. But what makes SHANKAR'S Makeover one of the worst of the season is how cruel Thomas treats Shankar. You really feel bad for Shankar, as Thomas is forcing him to participate in a dress-up competition even though he insists he doesn't want to. But Thomas forces it upon him anyway. I suppose it is a decent moral trying to teach kids that you can't force others to like something they might detest, but that doesn't make SHANKAR'S Makeover tolerable to sit through. It's just uncomfortable. Returning to the better episodes, at number 4 is Kenji on the rails again. Well, Color Me Blue, another continuation that was better than the special it proceeded from. This was a perfect conclusion. As a character that was clearly going to be yet another one-off, not only do we actually see Kenji leaving Sodor, but Hero too. If season 24 was meant to be the final season to Thomas & Friends, then this was a great way of saying goodbye. Nothing against Kenji as a character, but you could remove his face from World of Tomorrow and he would still have as much of a personality. But thankfully in this episode, they give him more characteristics, like being afraid of traveling alone, so they brought Hiro to join Kenji as they both come from Japan. Why I am not upset with Hiro leaving is because when you look at the number of episodes Hiro has been in recent years, there is hardly any. So if a studio couldn't think of much to do with him, then we might as well have a well-deserved farewell. If only we knew what happened to the other characters that mysteriously disappeared. At least we have our answer for Kenji and Hiro this time. For the 4th worst episode of season 24, it's Thomas's Animal Friends. Some fans claim the show in its current state is suffering from an identity crisis, and this episode perfectly exemplifies that. Of all the stories to tell, we have an episode about the engines of Sodor depicted as animals because Thomas is described as a cheeky engine, so therefore he should be a cheeky monkey now? There's really nothing else to say about this one. It's worthless, it's cringe-inducing, and goes to show not all ideas are good ideas. But at least we know what Thomas's spirit animal would be. I'm glad we have that answered. It's not like we have many other questions for as long as the TV show has been around. For the third best episode, I am giving it to Emily to the Rescue. Another example if season 24 was meant to be the final season, at long last we see Emily receive a number 12 on a tender, rightfully making her a true member of the STEAM team like the rest. Yes, there has always been that debate whether or not she replaced Duck as part of a STEAM team, but 1, we never directly see that unlike Nia and Rebecca. 2, we have seen other characters at Tim of Sheds before, but we never considered these guys to be a part of that cast. What I appreciate about this episode is how there is a reason for Emily to earn her number, rather than doing it out of nowhere, which is what took me by surprise. So alright, the ending is very impressive. How's the rest of the episode? Think of it as STEAM Team to the Rescue, but with more depth. Admit it, you forgot that special existed. There is plenty of action with a couple of Easter eggs, and overall teaches a good moral about emergency drills. Couple to that with this amazing line, and you have one of the best episodes from Big World Big Adventures.
You can never be too safe.
And for the third worst episode, The Inventor's Spectacular Bridge. An excellent choice of words for this title because it truly is spectacular. A spectacular failure it is! In fact, this invention is so incomprehensible in its design, it requires its own top 5 list. Problem number 1, it can only carry a small engine with one wagon at a time. And no more than that. Problem number 2, does this thing look stable? What if a giant rock or a log comes down beneath its foot pads? Problem number 3, this bridge operates with a handheld controller instead of a panel. So what if 2 engines need to come through in the same direction? How do they pass on the remote from driver to driver? Problem number 4, what if it breaks down? Only Ruth would be able to fix it because her inventions are so technologically advanced, none of the workmen will be able to fix this massive contraption without Ruth's help. What happens if she is unavailable? And problem number 5... it was Thomas's idea.
Inventing's like a walk in the park for her.
Ah, jeez, this is why we do not allow children to be managing our economies. Clearly these two have never heard of Kid Nation. For the second best episode, I'm giving it to James the Super Engine. I know! James the Super Engine is one of the better episodes of season 24? How could this be? Have you ever noticed James always comes face to face with karma? Typically a story around James involves him boasting about how cool he is, then gets humiliated in some way. But this one breaks the norm. Here, James pretends to be a super engine, who wants to show himself off how he is cooler than ever, probably more so than actually helping others. But James gets what he wants by the end. He doesn't get told off, he doesn't have any regrets. For an idea that should have been an instant failure, I think James the Super Engine was the biggest surprise this season. You won this time, Mattel. Although I would say, do not make this a trend for future episodes, although looking at the direction for the series moving forward, I think James becoming a super engine is the least of our worries. For the second worst episode, it is Nia and the Unfriendly Elephant. Well, this is more puzzling than Nia's livery, an episode that doesn't feature Thomas or a needless dream sequence. What could possibly go wrong here? Turns out that implementing the notorious 3 strikes you're out formula, as well as one of the most divisive characters in the entire show, is still a recipe for disaster. Nia and the Unfriendly Elephant is by far the most boring episode of the season, There's no action, no comedy, no appealing visuals, not even a good friendship between Nia and the elephant. At the very least, we could have had the elephant on a rampage and knocking Nia off the tracks. We have seen elephants strong enough to move engines around even in the classic era. But no, it's just a whiny Dumbo whose character arc boils down to get in, no, get in, no, get in, no, get in, okay. The strangest part about it is that this may be the best Nia episode because it signifies everything wrong with this character. She's from Kenya, a country in East Africa. What else? And that's where it ends, because there is nothing else to this character. While it may be a topic for another time, there is a great irony how Nia was meant to bring in a wider audience with her ethnicity, but obviously it's having the opposite effect of what the studio intended. But as I said, maybe another time. And finally, for the best episode of the season, it is the Great Little Railway Show. Leave it to Michael White to give us one of the better episodes of BWBA. Little Railway Show is fan service the episode. I'm sure many of us have been confused at some point whenever someone says, small engines? Well, there's Thomas who is pretty small, but then there are the narrow gauge engines who are even smaller, but then there's another railway that is specifically referred to as the small railway. So Michael did the smartest thing to come out of BWBA and crafted an excellent episode tackling this subject with all the little engines in one story. It's also the only time where we see the controllers come together to sort out the confusion, and who else to be the voice of reason to calm the situation other than Wilbert Audrey. Yes, I know that isn't actually him, but come on, it's clearly meant to be Audrey. If there is any reason to say the era of Big World Big Adventures went off on a high note, this is the episode to remind us that BWBA may not have redefined the franchise as Mattel hoped for, but there were some decent gems throughout these short years. But even so, there is one more episode we need to talk about, and if there is any reason to ignore the existence of Big World Big Adventures, it is Thomas's Fuzzy Friend. I have never seen the CGI era have animation this bad, it makes me feel sick to my stomach. It is the most horrifying character model probably in the history of computer animations. I would rather take the original Sonic the Hedgehog design over this, or the original CGI Jabba the Hutt design, or that baby from one of Pixar's earlier shorts, or whatever this is meant to be from Captain N the Game Master. The textures on this thing are non-existent. It is a splodge of CGI muck with eyes that are way too big for a normal dog. At least in Young Bao the Tiger, another episode in this season, they tried to make the tiger look real. It wasn't perfect, but even the elephant in the Nia episode we just talked about looked far better than this hellhound from Call of Duty Zombies. I would talk about the story, except it's practically non-existent. They find a stray dog, then find an owner for it. Why would anyone want to own this thing is beyond me. So okay, this is the worst episode of the season. Is it also the worst episode in the entire BWBA era? Well, Thomas in the Wild tried to deliver a very important environmental message and failed dramatically on that moral. This is just bad animation in a very dull story, and aside from the character model itself, Thomas's Fuzzy Friend is another boring episode that exemplifies, despite all the hyped up marketing, Big World Big Adventures clearly didn't have any grand ideas to work with. As a result, we are left with a laughable and embarrassing era for Thomas the Tank Engine and his friends. And that's going to be the end of the video. What do you think of Big World Big Adventures? Do you have any favorite or least favorite episodes in this installment? Do you think people are too harsh or too forgiving on BWBA? What do you think the writers could have done differently? Please leave a comment below what you think and your thoughts on the video itself, and until next time, take care, mates!